Hello everyone! I know it's been a really long time since I've uploaded anything to this channel, and that's partially because I was lazy, partially because of the pandemic, and partially because I had literally nothing interesting happening because I was home for most of the pandemic, and then it was just school, I guess? But today, I'm back with a very exciting video. And today, as you can see from the title, I'm going to review every single book that I read in 2021 in 2 sentences or less. So let's just get started and jump right into it. So the first book that I read, this will be in chronological order by the way. The first book that I read in 2021 was The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. And this is by Agatha Christie, and it's a mystery novel. So this is a standalone novel with the famous detective Hercule Poirot as he tries to solve a murder accompanied by a local doctor named James Shepherd. The plot twist is crazy, and I think this book forever changed the mystery genre. The next book I read was called Difficult Conversations, and it's a nonfiction self-help book. I had to read this book for a business ethics class, and there were some good quotes, so it was an all-right read, I guess. The next book I read was called The Hot Zone by Richard Preston, and it's a nonfiction science book. I read this book for another class, my infectious diseases class, and I had to write a book report about it. It's about the Ebola outbreak and is pretty descriptive, so stay away from it if you can't handle gross things. The next book that I read, which was not for school, was Circe by Madeline Miller, and it's a Greek retelling. This book is about Circe, who you may recognize from Percy Jackson, but makes Circe a baddie feminist icon. Madeline Miller's writing is really good, and I highly recommend this book to everyone. The next book that I read is called The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. I probably messed that up. And it's a thriller. This is a really good thriller if you're wanting to start exploring the genre more and you don't really read thrillers and you need somewhere to begin. I kind of predicted the plot twist mostly because I'd read some other books that were similar, but it's still very crazy, so I highly recommend. The next book I read was One of Us is Lying by Karen McManus. Why should I stop saying the author names? I will no longer be saying the author names. The genre is young adult mystery. It's a classical multiple POV, he said, she said mystery novel, and it was pretty good, but it reads very YA, so if you don't like that, it might not be for you. This next book that I read is called The Invisible Life of Addie Larue. It's fantasy, and it is one of my favorite books. So this book was written so beautifully, and it felt like I was highlighting a quote on every single page. Like I said, it's one of my all-time favorite books, and I still think about it all the time, even though I read it literally last year. This next book is called The Flatshare, and it's a contemporary romance. I'm not the biggest romance fan, and I have had friends who really enjoyed this one, so take what I say with a grain of salt. It was cute, but it just felt a little bit superficial to me. Up next is a book called They Both Die at the End. It's young adult, dystopian, LGBTQ+, and it's really hard to believe that this whole book only covers one day, but I absolutely loved all of the characters, and I did cry at the end because they do both die at the end. Up next is The Hating Game, which is another contemporary romance. This book is written so poorly. I'm sorry, but it sounds like a middle schooler wrote it. The story is cute adjacent, I guess. The next book I read was called Mexican Gothic, and it's fantasy/horror. The writing style was nice and descriptive, although the book moved a little bit slow. The reason I didn't like it though was that the plot was just too unbelievable for me. Up next is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, which I'm sure everyone has heard of by now. It's historical fiction, and this book is so hyped up, but I agree with the hype. The next books that I read are part of a series called The Raven Cycle, and I read the books The Raven Boys, Dream Thieves, and Blue Lily Lily Blue, and these are young adult fantasy. This whole series is really good and all the characters are super fleshed out. I haven't read the final book in this series yet because I'm nervous about the series ending, but the other books are really good. Up next is Honey Girl, which is contemporary fiction. This book was written really well, but I do remember that it moved slowly. I was also sick when I read this book, so I might have liked it more if I was not sick. Up next is The House in the Cerulean Sea, which is fantasy. I really liked this book, and if you enjoy the found family trope, then this book is definitely for you. Up next is The Love Hypothesis, which is a contemporary romance. And like I said before, I don't even really like romance, but this one was so good. It deserves all the hype it's getting, and we're just gonna ignore the fact that it's a Raylo fan fiction. Up next is In My Dreams, I Hold a Knife, which is a thriller. And this book is crazy. When I was reading it, my jaw dropped so many times, and I felt the need to tell every single person near me that I was reading this book, and the plot twists were extremely crazy. Up next is Murder on the Orient Express. This is another Agatha Christie classic mystery novel. It's pretty good, definitely delivers as a mystery if you're looking for something in that genre. Up next is Under the Whispering Door. It's by the same author who wrote The House in the Cerulean Sea and is also fantasy. It's very similar in vibes to Cerulean Sea, but I would say read Cerulean Sea instead. Coming up next, we have Finlay Donovan is Killing It, which the genre is a little hard to pinpoint. It's kind of like comedy, mystery, thriller. It's definitely a genre-bending book. It's super funny, full of plot twists, and the main protagonist, Finlay, is so likable. I highly recommend. Up next is The Spanish Love Deception, which is a contemporary romance. This book was everything that The Hating Game thought it was. I do think that there were some weird plot holes though, but overall it was a pretty cute book. Next is one of the best duologies I've ever read in my life. So up first is the Six of Crows book, which is, this duology is young adult fantasy. And all I have to say is that this book has some of the best characters I've ever read. They're super well fleshed out and they're all morally gray, which is so interesting to me. And then the second book in the series is called Crooked Kingdom, and it is just as good as the first one, and I did cry. Up next is Ace of Spades, which is young adult and a thriller. The best description for this book that I've seen is that Gossip Girl meets Get Out, and it's a really great read that addresses a lot of pressing issues surrounding covert racism. Up next is Fool Me Once, which is a contemporary romance but actually isn't out yet. I think it comes out in April. It's a really fun book that features a flawed female lead, and the author writes really well, but I was a little bit disappointed by the lack of diversity in the characters. And finally, we have Finlay Donovan Knocks Them Dead, which is the second book in the Finlay series. And this book was even better than the first book in my opinion, and it just came out on February 1st, so I highly suggest y'all read the series. It's super good. Those were the 28 books that I read in 2021. I actually read 30 books, but I didn't include 2 of them for different reasons. But yeah. If you've read any of these books, I'd love to know your thoughts. I hope that I've convinced you to read some of them and convinced you to hopefully stay away from some of the other ones. This year, in 2022, it's February just started and I've already read 13 books, so I think it's gonna be a little bit crazy of a year, but I'm very excited, and yeah. See y'all hopefully in less than 2 years. Thank you. Also, this is my laptop case.